Imagine for a moment an ancient mystery, a secret hidden deep within mystical teachings. Since the dawn of time, humanity has always wondered, what happens to the soul after death? Within this great enigma, there is a concept few know, a revelation that appears in the sacred scriptures and at the heart of Jewish mystical tradition: the 7 levels of hell. These levels are not just a frightening concept or a simple metaphor. They represent a profound spiritual journey, a process of purification for the soul that failed to reach its utmost purity in life. But what does this mean? Why 7 levels? And what happens to the soul in each of them? In Jewish mysticism, particularly in the Zohar, the foundational book of Kabbalah, we find answers to these questions. Hell, or Gehinnom as it is called, is not a place of eternal punishment but a place of purification, a necessary process for those who are not yet ready to present themselves before the Creator. Each level of hell reflects a specific type of sin, a failure in the spiritual walk, and as the soul passes through these levels, it seeks to purify itself, cleansing the stains it accumulated during its earthly journey. This narrative, my friends, is not just about pain or suffering. Above all, it is about redemption. The path through the 7 levels of hell is the soul's journey toward its purest essence until it is ready to reunite with the divine. Today, we will uncover this mystery together, understand each detail of this spiritual journey, and discover what truly happens to the soul as it passes through these 7 levels. Now, imagine the final moment of life. That instant when the body and soul separate, and everything we know ceases to exist as it once was. For many, death is simply the end of the physical body. But what happens to the soul? It is at this point that the journey truly begins. When the body, which is only a temporary vessel, returns to the dust of the earth, the soul, the true essence of the person, continues its existence in another dimension, a reality far beyond our understanding. But this transition is not simple. The soul, depending on its actions during life, may be burdened with impurities, stained by the mistakes, sins, and failures it accumulated throughout its earthly journey. Can you imagine? The soul, which should be pure and radiant, now finds itself stained, like a white garment covered in dirt. It longs to be in its purest form, ready to present itself before the Creator, but in this state, it cannot. And it is here that the separation of body and soul reveals one of the greatest mysteries: the need for purification. At this crucial moment, if the soul is not yet fully clean, it begins a process of purification. It is taken to a place called Gehinnom, or hell, but not as we imagine with fire and brimstone. On the contrary, this is the place where the soul must rid itself of the stains it carries. The soul is forced to confront all the unresolved errors from its life, and in doing so, its true journey of redemption begins. The separation of body and soul marks the beginning of a new phase for each person. And for those souls that have not yet reached the necessary purity, the path to redemption may be painful, but it is essential. Imagine for a moment your soul as an immaculate garment, a white dress, pure and spotless. Every action, every choice we make in life is like a touch on that dress. Some choices keep it clean and bright, but others leave marks, small stains that begin to accumulate. The great King Solomon, in his wisdom, warned us about this in Ecclesiastes. He said, "Let your garments always be white, for you never know when you will be called by the king." Solomon wasn't talking about physical clothes, of course. He was speaking of the soul. To him, the soul was like a white dress that one day, without warning, will have to be presented to the King of Kings, the Creator. Now, imagine that moment. Your soul, like a dress, being examined. Is it clean or is it dirty? If it's pure, ready to meet the Creator, everything is in order. But if there are stains of bad decisions, unredeemed sins, what then? How can one present themselves before the divine, before a being of pure perfection, with a stained soul? That is the great question. While we are alive, we have the opportunity to cleanse those stains, to purify our souls through repentance, kindness, and reconciliation. But if we do not do so, well, the soul will have to undergo a purification process after death. And it is this process that leads us to the feared Gehinnom, the purifying hell. Every stain on the soul's dress must be removed before we can meet the Creator. So the soul that is not completely white, completely pure, must be cleansed. And as we know, this cleansing can be painful, but it is absolutely necessary. We cannot present ourselves to the king with dirty clothes. We cannot stand before God with a stained soul. The white dress, the pure soul, this is the goal of our entire existence. With each moment, each choice, we are either sewing, cleaning, or staining this spiritual garment. And the great question that accompanies us is, are we ready for the final encounter? Now that we understand the importance of keeping our soul pure, we arrive at a crucial point. What happens when this purity is not achieved in life? This is where we enter the mysterious concept of Gehinnom, or hell. But wait, this isn't the hell you may have heard of, with eternal fire and endless punishment. Gehinnom is something much deeper, more complex, and paradoxically, more merciful. Imagine Gehinnom not as a place of divine vengeance, but as an opportunity for redemption, a space created for the soul to finally rid itself of the stains it carries. The Zohar teaches us that hell is actually a place of purification, where souls that are not yet ready to be in the presence of the Creator are taken to cleanse their impurities. Think of it as a necessary process, not of destruction, but of restoration. The soul, upon leaving the body, feels an immense desire to unite with the Creator, to reach the source of all light and perfection. However, if it is not completely pure, it cannot simply ascend and be accepted. It is drawn to Gehinnom, almost like a gravitational force preventing it from moving forward until it is entirely clean. The process can be painful, not because God is cruel or wants to punish, but because the soul is forced to confront every mistake, every stain it accumulated in life. It's as if the very shame of seeing its sins revealed is the real torment. But this pain is actually the cure. It is through this spiritual suffering that the soul finally frees itself and becomes purified. Gehinnom, then, is more of a spiritual hospital than a prison. The soul that passes through it emerges renewed, ready to ascend to higher levels, where it can be at peace in the divine presence. This process of purification is the last chance to correct what was left unresolved, to atone for mistakes, and to reach the state of purity necessary to reunite with the Creator. Ultimately, Gehinnom teaches us that even after death, there is hope. We are not eternally condemned, but have the opportunity to purify ourselves, to repair what was broken, and to find the peace we seek. Now, imagine yourself in a moment of transition, when the soul, after leaving the body, faces the inevitable: judgment. This is not an earthly court with judges and lawyers. Here, the soul itself carries its destiny in the marks it has accumulated throughout its life. As soon as the soul separates from the body, it is immediately greeted by celestial beings. These angels, created to fulfill divine orders, are there for a very specific mission: to guide the soul on its post-life journey. However, not all angels are the same. Among them is a being who carries a dark burden, the angel Duma. Duma is the guardian of souls that are not yet ready to meet the Creator. He appears in the scriptures as the angel of silence, a being who oversees the souls that must be taken to Gehinnom. Duma is mentioned in the Psalms, where it is said that the dead do not praise the Lord, nor do those who are in the hands of Duma. He is entrusted with receiving the impure souls, those that still need to undergo the process of purification. Imagine the scene. The soul, after leaving the body, is led by the angels to Duma. There, it stands before all the wrongs it committed, all the unredeemed sins, all the choices that stained its essence. It is a moment of total revelation. Nothing is hidden anymore. Everything the soul has done, both good and bad, is in plain sight. Duma, with unshakable serenity, receives the soul and then listens to its judgment. Every sin is announced, every failure is brought to light. And based on the severity of the sins, Duma decides the soul's fate, sending it to one of the 7 levels of Gehinnom. This is where the true journey begins. The soul cannot ascend to the Creator without first undergoing this process, without first being cleansed of the sins that keep it from divine perfection. And Duma, with the weight of responsibility in his hands, ensures that the soul receives the necessary treatment, not as punishment, but as redemption. In that moment, the soul realizes that judgment is not the end, but the beginning of its purification. Each sin, each mistake, is an opportunity for atonement. And under the watchful eye of Duma, the soul embarks on its journey through the levels of hell, with the hope that, in the end, it will be able to present itself clean and purified before the Creator. Now we arrive at a fascinating and terrifying point: the 7 levels of hell, each deeper and more challenging than the previous one. do not think of them as physical places with fire and brimstone, but rather as states of the soul, layers of purification, where imperfections are stripped away one by one. Each of these levels has a name and a meaning. The first level, Sheol, is the most superficial. Sheol is described in the scriptures as an abyss, a fall into darkness. The souls that arrive here are lost, as if they were in a void. There is no light, no direction, just a deep and oppressive silence. It is the beginning of the journey where the soul starts to realize the gravity of its mistakes. Descending a bit further, we find the second level, called Abaddon, which means perdition. But don't think of this perdition as a maze where the soul makes more mistakes. No, here the soul truly feels lost, desolate. Abaddon is the place where the soul becomes aware of its separation from the Creator, feeling the loneliness and emptiness of being far from the source of all life. Now, the third level is the most famous, Gehinnom, the hell itself. This name appears in the Zohar and is associated with a specific place on earth, the Valley of Hinnom, where idolatrous sacrifices once occurred in ancient times. The soul that reaches Gehinnom feels the weight of its sins as if carrying mountains. Here, it begins to face true purification. There is no physical fire, but the fire of shame consumes everything that still separates it from purity. At the fourth level, we enter Be'er Shakhat, the pit of destruction. The word pit evokes the idea of depth, and here the soul sinks deeper, facing a spiritual destruction. It's not the body at stake, but the essence of the soul, which feels the weight of its own ruin. And then, we arrive at the fifth level, Tit Halavin, a sticky mire, like spiritual quicksand. Here the soul tries to escape but sinks deeper, feeling the weight of its failures. The struggle is constant and every movement seems to sink it further. In the sixth level, we find Tsia, which means desolation. Here, the soul finds nothing. It is a place devoid of life, without hope. The soul feels completely alone, isolated from everything and everyone. This state is one of the most difficult, as spiritual loneliness can be devastating. Finally, the seventh and last level is Tzalmavet, the shadow of death. Here, the soul is engulfed in darkness, so dense that it is as if death itself is present. This is the lowest point, where the soul confronts the final destruction of everything that once connected it to the earthly world. These 7 levels are not fixed places. Each one reflects the state of the soul, the degree of its impurity, and the depth of its sins. The soul passes through them in search of redemption, confronting its failures, purifying itself layer by layer, until it is finally ready to ascend. Now that we know the 7 levels of hell, an important question arises. Why are there different levels? The answer lies in the very souls that arrive in Gehinnom. They are not all the same, and each carries a different burden, a set of sins that places them in one of these levels. Just as there are 7 levels of hell, there are also 7 types of sinners, and each one corresponds to one of these levels. Every sin committed, every character flaw, places the soul in a specific spot, reflecting the gravity of the errors accumulated in life. Let's discover who these souls are and how their choices place them in different stages of purification. The first type of soul is that of the Ra, the simply wicked person. This isn't someone who lived a life of extreme evil, but a person who, through their actions, was corrupted by malice and repeated small errors. This soul, with its lesser faults, is taken to the first level, Sheol, where its purification begins in a gentler manner. But then we reach the Belial, a more serious case. This term, often translated as villain or scoundrel, describes a person whose life was marked by corrupt intentions. This soul not only made mistakes, but also dedicated itself to spreading discord and malice. The fate of the Belial is the second level, Abaddon, where desolation and total loss of direction become the torment of their soul. The third type of sinner is the Chote, the common sinner, one who committed mistakes without redemption. They are not a villain, but they also did not repent for their sins. This is the type of person who lived without much remorse, without seeking purification in life. Their soul is taken to Gehinnom, the third level, where true purification begins to demand a high price. Now we enter a deeper level of evil with the Rasha, the wicked one. This is not just a sinner, it is someone who deliberately chose the path of evil, affecting other lives with their actions. The soul of the Rasha finds its fate in Be'er Shachat, the pit of destruction, where the weight of their deeds begins to corrode their essence. Then we reach the Mashchit, which means destroyed. This is someone who was completely consumed by their own sins to the point of losing their humanity. The Maschit not only sinned, but allowed their errors to utterly destroy them. This soul sinks to the fifth level, Tit Halavan, the mire where spiritual destruction manifests. In the sixth level, we encounter the Leitzan, a surprising character. The term can be translated as clown, but not the kind that brings joy. This is the mocker, the one who ridicules the sacred, who despises divine commandments and scorns spirituality. For the Leitzan, life was a meaningless joke. He is condemned to the level of Tsia, total desolation, where nothing remains but emptiness. Finally, the gravest of all, the Yahir, the proud one. This is the soul consumed by arrogance, by pride, the one who placed themselves above everything and everyone, including God. The Yahir is taken to the darkest level, Salmavet, the shadow of death. There, they confront the complete darkness of their soul, where there is no more light, no hope. These 7 types of sinners show us that the soul's path after death is not the same for everyone. Each of these types reflects a depth of wickedness, and each is purified in a specific level of hell. Thus, divine justice acts with precision, guiding each soul to its exact fate, where it will finally face its errors and seek redemption. Now, imagine the moment when the soul finally enters Gehinnom. There is no turning back, no more excuses. The process of atonement begins, and here, my friends, there is no physical fire or punishment by flames. The true torment is much deeper, much more personal. It is the fire of shame, the burning regret within the soul itself. Every mistake, every sin the soul committed in life is revealed before it. There is no escape. There is no hiding. The soul sees, with absolute clarity, the impact of its actions. All those choices that seemed small and insignificant now appear as spiritual scars that need to be healed. The pain is intense, but not because God desires to punish the soul, but because the soul finally understands the weight of what it has done. And it is this understanding that creates the true fire. Think of it. There is nothing more devastating than looking at your own mistakes and realizing how much they have pulled you away from who you were meant to be. In Gehinnom, the suffering is not imposed by external forces, but by the soul itself, which feels the deep need to purify. This process of purification is not immediate. Just as a stain on fabric does not disappear with a simple touch, the soul must work to free itself from its sins. Each level of hell is a step in this journey, and the deeper the stain, the more painful the cleansing will be. But the ultimate goal always remains the same: to cleanse the soul of all impurity, restoring it to the state of purity it had before it fell into error. Can you imagine the soul immersed in this spiritual fire, reviewing each moment of its life with absolute clarity? There is no denying, no escaping. The soul knows it must go through this, that this pain is the path to redemption. And though it is difficult, it understands that without this process, it could never approach the Creator. This is the true purpose of Gehinnom, not to destroy the soul, but to transform it. It is a process of healing where each error is confronted and each stain is removed, until finally the soul is ready to rise again, purer, lighter, and closer to its divine essence. And so, in the midst of this fire of shame and regret, the soul finds hope. Because in the end, it knows that this journey through hell is not the end. It is merely the beginning of its renewal. It will emerge from this stronger, purer, and finally worthy of being in the presence of the Creator. Now imagine time dragging on. The soul, immersed in the process of purification in Gehinnom, begins to wonder, how long will this last? Is there an end to this painful journey? The answer, though difficult to accept, brings a glimmer of hope. Yes, there is a limit. The time a soul spends in each level of hell depends on the depth of its mistakes and the severity of its sins. But for most, the process of purification is not eternal. According to the Zohar, souls that were not extremely wicked may spend up to 11 months in hell. This period is the time needed for most impurities to be removed, allowing the soul to finally free itself from the weight it carries. However, for those who committed more serious sins, the time can extend to 12 months. It is as if the soul is undergoing a refining process, where each layer of impurity is slowly peeled away until it is completely clean. But for some souls, unfortunately, the fate is much darker. There are those who lived a life of pure evil, spending their entire lives harming others, stealing, hurting, and committing endless injustices. For these souls, the punishment may have no end. They may be condemned to a state of eternal torment, where purification seems impossible. This special level, almost like an eighth level of hell, is reserved for those whose sins were so intense, so devastating, that the soul can no longer be restored. These souls, having crossed the limits of human wickedness, fall into an abyss with no return. Not out of divine vengeance, but because they have destroyed themselves so much that there is no way to rebuild the essence of who they were. But this is not the reality for most souls. The beauty of this process, as painful as it is, lies in the idea that it has an end. For those who committed sins but also performed good deeds, there is hope. They can endure the suffering, knowing that, at the end of their 11 or 12 months, they will be freed. And when this time of purification ends, the soul emerges transformed. The good deeds a person did in life are not nullified by their sins. They continue to shine, waiting for the moment when the soul is ready to receive its reward. And so, after this period of atonement, the soul can finally ascend to the higher realms, where it will receive its reward in the world of souls, awaiting the moment of the resurrection of the dead. Thus, my friends, the time in Gehinnom is not without purpose. It is limited, and its function is to prepare the soul for the next stage, so that when this cycle is complete, the soul can enter the light, purified and restored. And now we reach the end of the journey. Imagine the soul, after having traversed all the levels of hell, each layer of purification, each moment of confrontation with its own mistakes. The pain of shame, the weight of regret, and the intensity of the process were immense, but finally, it all comes to an end. What happens now? The time of purification ends, and the soul emerges renewed. Every stain, every spiritual flaw has been cleansed. The soul, once covered in sins and impurities, now shines with a new light. And here's the beauty of this process. Purification does not erase the good deeds a person performed in life. Their good actions, their moments of kindness, charity, and love all remain intact, waiting for the moment when the soul is purified so that it can reap the rewards of those actions. Now the soul is ready for its reward. It ascends to the higher spiritual realms, where it will find peace and rest in the world of souls. There, it awaits the arrival of the great day, the day of the resurrection of the dead, when souls will be reunited with their purified and restored bodies. This is the final destination for those who have gone through the process of purification, and there is something profound and comforting in this idea. Divine punishment, no matter how intense and painful it may be, is temporary. Divine justice, unlike human punishment, is always aimed at restoration. God does not wish to destroy his creations, but to renew them. Hell, Gehinnom, is not the end of the line. It is merely a stage, a place of transition where souls find their way back to purity. After all the suffering, after all the atonement, what remains is eternal goodness. The soul, now free of its impurities, receives its place in the spiritual world, where it will live in peace, awaiting the moment to reunite with the Creator at the time of resurrection. Punishment may come to an end, but the reward is eternal. This is the final message of this journey. Hell, suffering, and pain, all of this is limited, but goodness, light, and the reward of being in the presence of the Creator are infinite, and the soul, after its long journey, finally finds rest. The path of purification may be arduous, but in the end, the destination is one of peace, light, and eternity.